everyone, in this video we'll be going over A-Level Accounting 2023 May-June Paper 2 question number 2. So this is paper 2, which consists of 4 questions. 2 of them will be of 30 marks and 2 of them will be of 15 marks. And the total time limit for this paper will be 1 hour and 45 minutes. Since question number 2 is of only 15 marks, ideally we should be spending about 17 minutes in order to solve this question. And in this video as well, we will be attempting to solve this question under 17 minutes. So without any further delay, let's get started. Rudra prepares bank reconciliation statements for his business at the end of each month. Now, for the first part of this question, we need to state 3 reasons why it is important to a business to prepare a bank reconciliation statement at regular intervals. So the very first reason that we need to prepare a bank reconciliation statement is to identify errors in the cash book as well as in the bank statement. Let's write it down. To identify errors in the cash book as well as bank statements. Now, preparing a bank reconciliation statement will also help in reducing the chances of fraud. So, to help reduce the chances of fraud. This is because the bank reconciliation statement will help us tally our cash balance to that of bank balance and see if there has been any missing transactions that we are yet to record in both of our statements. Now, the third reason that we need to prepare bank reconciliation statement will be to identify any of the missing transactions, which will be of unpresented checks or dishonored checks. Let's write it down. To identify unpresented checks and dishonored checks. Okay, that's all for the first part of this question. Now let's move towards the second one. We're given additional information. On 31st March 2022, the balance shown in the business's cash book, bank columns, was 3,060 overdrawn. Now, overdrawn just means that our bank balance has a negative amount of 3,060, and this did not agree with the balance shown on the business's bank statement on this date. The difference in the two balances were accounted for by the following. Okay, first of all, let's have a look at our second question. We need to prepare the cash book to show the updated balance at 31st March 2022. So in order to figure out our updated balance, we first need to start with the balance given, which is 3,060 overdrawn. And we already know that this is a negative bank balance, which means that this will act as our liability. And for this, our opening balance should be shown on the credit side. So let's write down this amount of 3,060 on the credit side as our opening balance. Now we need to figure out whether or not these errors will have an effect on our cash book. So the very first one is that Rudra had omitted to record a direct debit charge for water charges of 442. So since these are the water charges, we definitely need to treat it as an expense of 442. And we are told that Rudra had omitted to record this, which means that he has definitely omitted to record this in his cash book as well. So we need to show this 442 as an expense in our cash book. And expenses will always be recorded on the credit side in case of our cash book. So this side will record all of our expenses, whereas the debit side will record all of our incomes. So we can just write down our water charges of 442. All right. Now there are unpresented checks of 482 to TK Stores and 1,043 to RH Supplies. So unpresented checks are those checks that have been issued by Rudra, but it has not yet been cashed for by TK Stores and RH Supplies. So we will already have recorded these amount of 482 and 1,043 as an expense in our cash book, but these are yet to be adjusted in our bank statement. So this will not affect our cash book, but we definitely have to consider it if we have to prepare a bank reconciliation statement. So we can just ignore it for now. The third one is bank charges of 85 appeared on the bank statement. So this is already adjusted in the bank statement, but not yet been recorded in the cash book, which means that we need to record this 85. And remember that this is bank charges, which is definitely an expense. So we just need to record this amount of 85 on the credit side of our cash book. Let's write it down. So that's going to be 85 as bank charges. All right. Okay, we did 1 and 3. Now for 4, Rudra had debited the cash book with cash takings 893, but this had not yet been recorded by the bank. So again, this is an error that we need to adjust while preparing our bank reconciliation statement. But we do not have to consider it while preparing our cash book. Alright, let's move to the next one. A check payment to Peter, 320, had been correctly recorded in the bank statement, but had been entered in the cash book as 230. So this is a check payment to Peter, which we can treat as an expense. So we should have recorded 320 on the credit side as an expense, but we only recorded 230. So the remaining amount is just going to be 320 minus 230, which results in 90. So we are yet to record 90 as check payment to Peter. So now we just need to record this amount of 90 as an expense in our cash book under the heading of Peter. Let's write it down. That will be 90 to Peter. All right. The bank statement included an entry for a dishonored check for 582 received by Rudra from Jamia. Now, dishonored check just means that we received a check for 582 from Jamia, but when we went to the bank could not cash this amount due to some error or maybe lack of funds in Jamia's account. Now, no entries have been made in the cash book to record the dishonored check. Okay, so once we had received this check of 582, we had already entered this as an income in our cash book, but now it is dishonored, which means that we are yet to receive this amount of 582. So we need to cancel it out from our income, which means that we need to present this 582 on the expense side of our cash book so that it cancels out with the previously mentioned income from the check given by Jamia. So what we need to do is just write down this amount of 582 on the credit side to represent it as an expense so that it can be cancelled out with the previously entered income of the same amount. So let's write it down. We can just enter this amount under the heading of Jamia. That will be Jamia with the amount of 582. All right. Now for the 7th one, an error had been made in the cash book. Interest received 225 had been correctly recorded in the bank statement, but had been credited in the cash book. So remember that this is interest received, which means that we need to treat this 225 as an income. So if we treated it correctly, we would have received 225 on the debit side, but mistakenly we have recorded it in the credit side in the cash book. So this is the correct one. So we require this one. Now, if we enter 225 on the debit side once, it will just get cancelled out with the same amount that we had previously entered on the credit side. Now, in order to represent 225 as interest received on the debit side, we would have to record it again. So this just means that in order to rectify this error, we just need to enter the same amount twice, so that once it gets cancelled out with the previously mentioned error in the credit side, and once it will represent the correct interest received on our debit side. So the total is just going to be 450, which we need to record on the debit side as interest received. Let's write it down. So that will be 450 as interest received. Okay, we have considered all of our errors, which means that now we can move towards figuring out the closing balance. We can clearly see that the credit side is heavier, so let's figure out the total. That's 3060 plus 442 plus 85 plus 90 plus 582, which results in 4259. Now our closing balance will be on the debit side. And remember, in order to figure out the closing balance or the balancing figure, we always have to subtract these amount from the total. In this case, that's just going to be 4259 minus 450, which results in 3809. Now remember that we need to enter this closing balance as the opening balance for next period on the opposite side. So that's going to be balance brought down of 3809. Now again, remember that we got our opening balance on the credit side in our cash book, which means that again this amount will represent our negative bank balance. Alright, that's all for the second part of this question. Now we can move towards the third one. We now need to prepare a bank reconciliation statement to show the bank statement balance at 31st March 2022. So we need to show the bank statement balance, which means that we will start with our balance as per the cash book, which we've already figured out just now. That's 3,809. And remember that this is a negative bank balance. So we can just enter this amount, but we need to represent it as a negative balance. Now, in order to figure out the correct bank statement balance, we only have to adjust those errors that will have an effect in our bank statement. And we have already figured it out to be the error for 2 and 4. Let's have a look at 2. These are the unpresented checks for TK Stores and Arad Supplies. And we've already mentioned that unpresented checks are the checks already issued by our company and already recorded it in our cash book, but it is yet to be adjusted in our bank balance. And when we are preparing a bank reconciliation statement, starting with our balance from the cash book, unpresented checks should always be added. So this just means that we need to add this amount of 482 and 1043 to our balance. Let's write it down. These will be our unpresented checks to TK Stores. It was a 482, and RH Supplies, and this was a 1043. Now the total unpresented check is just going to be 482 plus 1043, which results in 1525. Okay, now the next error was that Rudra had debited the cash book with cash takings 893, but this had not yet been recorded by the bank. So these are the cash takings, which just means that we withdrew 893 from our bank statement, and this is yet to be adjusted in our bank. So we can just consider this as our outstanding bankings. And since we're starting our bank reconciliation statement with our balance as per the cash book, always remember that the outstanding banking should be subtracted. But if we were to start our bank reconciliation statement as per the balance in our bank statement, we would have subtracted our unpresented checks and added our outstanding banking. So I'm just going to write it down right here. If you're starting with our cash book balance, you need to add the unpresented checks and subtract the outstanding bankings in order to get your bank balance or balance as per the bank statement. And it is going to be the exact opposite if we start with our bank balance. So in this case, we would need to subtract the unpresented checks and add all of our outstanding bankings. And this will result in our cash book balance. Okay, so as per the format, we just need to subtract 893. And we can just write it down under the heading of outstanding bankings. That's of 893. Okay, that was the only two errors that we need to adjust in our bank reconciliation statement. So now we can just figure out our balance as per the bank statement. That's going to be the sum of these three amounts. So that's negative 3,809 plus 1,525 minus 893, which results in negative 3,177. Okay, that was all for the third part of this question. Now let's move towards the fourth one. We need to define each of the following terms. The first one is unpresented check. So we've already said before that unpresented check is just the check payment which have been already recorded in the cash book, but these are yet to be presented to the bank for payments. Let's write it down. A check payment recorded in the cash book but not yet presented to the bank for payment. Now the second one is dishonor check. Again, dishonor check are those checks which a bank will refuse to pay due to an error or the lack of funds in the account. So these are check which a bank refused to pay due to an error or lack of funds in the account. Alright, this concludes the fourth part of this question as well as the entire question. If you found this video useful, make sure you like the video and leave a comment below, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you do not miss any of these videos in the future. Thank you.